Join us as we discuss everyday issues, sharing real stories with friends, laughing and learning together, touching lives one at a time, inspiring each other to live life in victory. This is Table Talk with Patience Mlengana.
Welcome to Table Talk with Patience. Today our guest is one of my favorite people, my good friend, Andrew Fasademi. He's actually married to one of my best friends, Shade. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Patience. Thanks. And congratulations on the show, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. How are the boys?
They're well. They're growing. They were home some time ago, and whenever they're home, it's lots of fun. Music is blaring. First one, 21.
Oh, wow. You're going to have a daughter-in-law soon, isn't it?
I see you're offering.
Okay. Andrew is a businessman. He is a Christian, and he is serving in his local church. He's been an usher for 19 years. To me, it just doesn't make sense. I'm going to get him to make us understand that servanthood and Christianity and being an astute businessman, where does he get time to do all these things? Andrew, actually, is it important to serve in your local church?
I believe it is. I've always believed that from when I became a Christian, even without necessarily being a businessman at that particular point in time. But more so when I went into business, and it keeps me grounded. That's just one of the things. Being a businessman, you're fighting a different kind of battle on the outside world. And in church, I found out that it wasn't just enough to come and sit in church under a pastor's teaching, that you had to get involved. Being an usher grounds me a lot. You sort of need a lot of humility.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
You know, to be an usher.
Yes. Actually, you know, to be honest with you, when I first saw you before we really got closer, I just thought, well, he's an usher. I could not match the fact that you are such an astute businessman. And, you know, when I saw that, it actually challenged me, you know, that how can this man that is doing so well in business, every Sunday he's standing and showing people where to sit and serving people, you know, that is true, that is the gospel right there.
There's a quick story, and I hope I can make it short.
Yes.
Of a lady that I used to meet in church. She used to bounce into church, and I one day called her and said, "What do you do?" And she said she was a journalist, and I indicated, I said, "What do you want to do with the rest of your life?" She said she'd like to go into communications. And I asked her to see a particular lady, and she didn't know at that time that that lady was an MD of one of the companies in my group. Anyway, bottom line, she bounced back. She passed me a couple of weeks later and said, "I got that job, you know, from that lady that you asked me to see." So on the Monday, she said, "I'm starting tomorrow, Monday." So Monday comes, and the MD is showing her around, and the last person she introduces her to, she says, "So let's introduce you to the chairman of the company." And she walks into my office, and the lady says, "This is our chairman, Andrew." And her jaw drops, and she goes, But you're an usher." She didn't quite forgive me for not telling her that I was chairman of the company where she was asked to go for a job. And there have been many issues like that. It's just a very humbling and grounding experience that you finish the wars of the external world and you come into church and you're no longer necessarily being the one being served. The tables are turned on you and you serve. You can imagine it's a cold Sunday morning,
Yes.
5 degrees, 7 degrees, you're rubbing your hands in the cold, and you're saying hello to people, and people come to church with all sorts of burdens.
Yes.
And sometimes people don't even greet you, they don't return the greeting, you put out your hand to shake people, and they just wave your hand aside, and it just shows you that, you know, this is a different world.
How did you get to that level? Did you have a Damascus experience? How did you get there?
Well, I believe very in my local church where I grew up as a practicing Christian. Let me put it like that, as a practicing Christian, we were really encouraged to get involved in serving. For one, it got you out of mischief.
Yeah.
Because when we served, we had workers' meetings every Saturday. There were Wednesday services where you had to go. And the only other days where there was room for mischief was a Friday night. And what many of us did was to get together and have our own little sort of newborn again Christian gatherings where we just knew that we had to have these things because the alternatives were not really the best things that we wanted to go back into. So what then became almost like, let's get involved so we can do other things, then became norm. It became a habit. And it became something that you drew huge amounts of self-satisfaction for, because I'm sure you know just as much as I that when you're serving in the ministry, you get involved and exposed to other parts. So you're called to pray for people, you know, and a whole lot of other things that you're not just an usher, you're doing other things.
So Andrew, the businessman, and Andrew, the servant, can you separate the two? When you're in the boardroom, is it easy to separate, you know, how do you pull them together?
They're basically very intertwined, and they become very intertwined. The habits that you pick up as an usher, so to speak, or the demands that are made of you as an usher will ultimately show in just about every other part of your life. And it's not just in business, that they'll show in your relationship with people, your relationship with friends. I get to a party and I'm looking at the tables and looking at the chairs and automatically arranging chairs, and you know, so they do intertwine. And the same thing, you come to church and you see things that your skills as a businessman will call upon you to look at with different eyes. So, and also in church, you tend to meet a lot of people who you sort of mentor, who realize that you're this businessman, and they too are budding business people as well. And that becomes a ground where you can actually pass those skills informally or formally to people. And you're always getting that on a revolving basis.
Actually, you just touched on my next question, that, you know, I believe you're an apostle in the marketplace. You are becoming a light, because a lot of people don't believe that you can be a very good businessman and still be a Christian and still, I mean, I'm not even talking about serving, but just becoming a Christian and becoming this big businessman. They don't believe in that. But if you have people that are looking up to you and that you are mentoring and they're seeing how successful you are in business, I think it's just being a light in the corporate world. Well,
I think the first thing I want to say is, look, you know, glory be to God.
Amen.
You know, that one, you can call one that, but that's, we all have a lot of scars on our back from business. You know, many of us have learned huge lessons. We've learned huge lessons, rather. We've learned very painful ones, mistakes that many of us have made. You know, I don't want to leave people with the notion or with the impression that, you know, it's all honky-dory and it's all you know, you sort of get into trouble, you realize your mistakes, you get out of it, you get into bad partnerships, you get into bad transactions, you don't think before you do things, or you don't inquire enough of the Lord. The thing that's becoming quite a reality is how to, you know, somebody the other day, a friend of mine was coming to ask me and said, you know, why don't you come and teach some of our pastors?
Let's just hold it there and go on a break. I want us to start there.
Friendship is important and needs to be cherished. Get a copy, The Heart of Friendship by Patience Mlengana. Galatians 6 verse 7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." Get a copy, My Personal Sowing and Reaping Journal by Patience Mlengana. These are now available at Trema Bookshop and online live store.
Welcome back to Table Talk. Andrew, before we went on a break, you were talking about the experiences that have left some scars. How can you protect some of us not to go through the same mistakes or same experiences?
Do you have a day?
I don't have a day. I wish I had, but you know,
Okay.
if you have
I'll
two
try.
or three,
I'll
yes.
just try and make people aware of some
Yes.
of the things that personally I've gone through, and I've left very painful memories. I think the first thing for me, and in no order of real priority, is the issue of partnerships.
Oh, yes.
I think business people out there, you know, the Bible has a saying, and it says that you must not be unequally yoked.
Oh, yes.
And many of us sort of believe that the unequal yoking has to do with not doing business with, or doing business with non-Christians.
Non-believers,
You
yes.
can actually be unequally yoked with another Christian.
Oh, yes.
And that's just the truth of the matter. Partnerships are essentially a very, very important thing, because the key thing to understand is that you're mixing destinies.
Oh, yes, definitely.
All right? Now, it's one thing to understand your destiny and for your partner to understand their destiny.
Yeah.
And that destiny, at the end of the day, is planned and made up from God Himself.
Amen.
Now, can you imagine mixing your destiny with somebody whose destiny is really not the destiny that God planned for them? And you're already putting your destinies together.
Wow, that's profound, eh?
You understand what I'm saying? So there are
Yes.
very, very deep implications
Yes.
about the kind of partnerships that you pursue in life. And I've just mentioned one example.
That for me is just...
You know, I mean, best friends are usually not necessarily best business partners. I remember that I had to, we had to agree to split a partnership with one of my very closest friends, who I still remain a close friend today, when we realized very painfully that being very good friends did not mean that we'll make good partners. The second thing, and just being very aware of time, is the fact that no matter how great or good the deal looks, if it's not yours, it's not yours.
Amen.
And many of us in our different business walks, we're just looking for the deal.
Yes.
We're looking for the deal. If it looks good, you convince yourself that that deal is for you. And it's not necessarily so. I've been in situations where, you know, it looked really good. It was a listed company. We went into it, and at the end of the day, lots of scars, lots of woes. And then I think the third, and probably the most important thing for me, is the issue of not understanding the Lord's will for you in regard to the business that you embark on.
Yes.
We find it very, very difficult to talk to God, to hear from God regarding this thing. And you know, sometimes, you know, you wait for that still small voice, you don't hear it. But there are other ways of hearing from God. You go and seek His word, and you find peace in His word regarding a certain thing that you want to embark on. And I found out for me that over the years, what has worked personally for me the most has been the business that I've embarked on and walked with God on.
Amen.
And didn't involve any other person. For me personally, those are the things that have worked when I've reduced it to that kind of level.
Did you find out that when you go on those that you believe it's God's purpose for your life, there's no struggle, that much of a struggle? Because many a times you look at a deal and it's so big and you say, I want to be in this thing. But you find that the minute you're or in the middle of the deal, there is so much strife, there is so much difficulty, because maybe you didn't inquire of the Lord. First of all, you don't know whether it's part of your purpose or not. What I'm finding out from what you're saying is that it is important to know what your purpose is.
It's exceptionally important. There is a book by by Bishop David Oyedepo
Yeah.
of Nigeria, that speaks about divine purpose.
I've got that book.
You've got
It's
that small
lovely.
book.
It's a lovely
Exactly.
book.
I've read the book about 8 times, and you can never read it enough.
Oh, yes.
But I sort of find out, the truth of the matter, Patience, is that walking with God sometimes can be a struggle.
Yeah.
You know, I was reading somewhere the other day that when things are not happening sometimes, it's probably God telling you to stay where you are,
Yeah.
not necessarily jump out of the boat. Walking with God in business can be a struggle because in business, there are trials. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not meant to be there. You'll know in your heart of hearts
Yes.
if it's a struggle as a result, as you're not supposed to be in there in the first place, or it's as a result of this is just a tough hump that you have to climb over. You'll know.
Would you say, God, if it gets very tough, the Lord would give you the grace to stay on? People would say, why is Andrew staying in that business? It's just so tough. Why can't he just jump ship? But because you are destined for that business, do you believe God will give you the grace to persevere and pass that season? Where is perseverance? Where does it play a role?
Where does it play a role? I think fundamentally at the heart of everything, you've got to decide that you're not a quitter.
Yes.
Basically,
Wow,
fundamentally.
that's good.
That's the first thing.
Yes.
The second thing is understanding what season you're in, okay? And not mixing quitting with, I need to step off this because the Lord never meant for me to be in the first place. Two stories or two things quite signify this from the Bible. Two very little known things. The owner of the vineyard who went to his vineyard at the end of the 3rd year and asked his vine dresser that he was actually going to kill that vineyard. And the vine dresser said, give me 1 more year. And I will dig a moat round this vineyard. I will dress it up.
Yeah.
If this vineyard does not bear fruit,
Produce.
you can come back and kill it. That was sort of an indication from that parable that 4 years, thereabout, do you understand me? And the Israelites also had an old custom in those days that if anything didn't work after 4 years, you know, they would stop it. For me, those are some sort of rough guidelines. I can't be held to these, but these are best examples in the Bible that I can go through. Do you understand me? And sometimes don't wait till that time because that still small voice is telling
Yes.
you that you're actually not supposed to be
Yeah.
in this. And the earlier you know,
The
the
better. Okay.
It's just about being in tune with God's voice and God's purpose for your life and understanding all those milestones up until that point. That's the most important thing.
How do you stay true to God in business and still, you know, be ethical? You know, we see and hear about a lot of stories that are happening, corruption, bribes, and, you know, what is your view? How do you stay true? You know, a lot of people think that the business world is actually a war zone for Christians because, you know, what do you do when you want a big deal